And what are the alternatives for the Philadelphia 76ers this offseason? If
pain and suffering, Devon.
Land a big
pain and
star.
suffering.
It seems it's pain and suffering. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast alongside Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens with you. Brianna producing as always, all of you in the chat, some super chats maybe a little bit later on as well. A lot to discuss with this basketball team as things continue to emerge, and it kind of leads us into a different direction of conversation today of if the 76ers don't do one thing that we've been discussing so much so far this offseason, how will it then play out? How would you feel about it? How would we all feel about it? And what would that basketball team look like for the 24-25 season? And as we get into that, we'll talk a bunch about some different names. Again, sure, the names that we always discuss, but maybe a few more that we haven't really thrown out there as much. We'll get into those in just a little bit. So as we hang out with you on this Thursday, just ahead of the holiday weekend for you all. But Kyle, as we sit here and discuss all of this and we look at the alternatives and pain and suffering, as you said, and if they do punt, Akil McKnight, as you mentioned before we started, first in the chat saying if Morey punts, we punt him. Is there
I appreciate the energy, Akil.
that they actually punt this offseason and it looks way different than what we thought?
Okay, so today, for anybody who's not up to speed, there was a report from our friend of the program, Jake Fischer, at Yahoo, touched on quite a few things, right? About the Paul George factor, about potentially trading for Donovan Mitchell, about everybody thinking LeBron is probably staying in Los Angeles, that there's been no indication he's all that interested in moving. We'll get to those individual pieces throughout the show. Underneath all of this, there is a blurb I'm going to read word for word right now. Quote, "In the event Philadelphia is unable to land a big fish this summer, look for the Sixers to flush out their roster with similar non-guaranteed money as of the past season's approach. Philadelphia, sources said, will prioritize being nimble with salaries in order to move whenever the next disgruntled star becomes available." So that would be, I want to be clear with the wording here, a fucking disaster on several fronts. The most important front would be not to say forget the fans or forget us or forget anybody else. Forget everyone outside for a second. Selling that to Joel Embiid after last season, where the whole idea is we're preserving flexibility, and it's all next summer, we're getting our big fish. We're making a big trade. We're doing this. Joel comes out at his final end of season press conference and says, continuity matters. We have the two guys and me and Tyrese. Love to add to it, all that. To then come back in July and throughout the rest of the offseason. And look, I'm not saying that the Sixers are going in saying, oh, yeah, we want to punt again. But if you strike out, if you come away with no stars and you just say, we'll do another year where we're just we're good enough to be in the mix, but we're not really serious contenders and we need things to break right for us, this organization will rightfully get destroyed. And Joel Embiid will more than likely look around the room and say, what am I doing here? What are you guys doing? Why, after all I've done for the organization, and look, there's plenty of genuine criticism for Joel for ways that he's failed, both earlier in his career, his body not holding up, how he's performed in different series, etc. But he's put his body on the line. He's produced at an extraordinarily high level for 8 seasons now. You cannot look that guy in the eye and say, yeah, we'll get him another year from now. Or not, you can't even say another year from now. We'll get him at an indeterminable date in the future where somebody might ask out and they might be a fit with what we have. What happens if you say, all right, well, we didn't get our star, so we'll kick the can down the road a little bit. And then the next star that asks out is a guy who doesn't fit with Tyrese Maxey in the backcourt. So what do you do then? You're just waiting some more? You're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting? I understand everybody wants the perfect opportunity. Certainly everybody in the chat has shot down a lot of our ideas or a lot of the hypothetical targets. There are only so many things, so many days, so many years you can push it off in the future. Now is the time. I don't care how you have to get it done. They absolutely cannot go in the next season with the flexibility plan for a second year in a row.
So I'm going to lay out some numbers in terms of, and I'm going to do that while tapping in the desk or waving my hand just to make it a little more dramatic for the YouTube. I've got, like I said, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to see if I can really hammer in the point.
It's natural. It has to just be part of the extension of your voice.
You're on camera now.
So,
5 days a week.
If the Sixers go into next season, they will have Joel Embiid at $55.2 million, Tyrese Maxey at $38.1 million.
So you're already mixing up names. You got to just focus on the talking
I'm focused
part.
so much on waving my hands. We know that now because Tyrese Maxey, which we thought we were going to spend a show talking about, Tyrese Maxey did not make All-NBA, so his second-year salary on a max deal would be $38.1 million, and then incomplete roster charges. That would leave you about a little over $49 million in cap space for next summer. When you start talking about max salary slots for the projected cap, it would be $38.8 million for a 25% max, 46.5 for 30%, and 54.3 for a 35% max. That means even with just Embiid and Maxey on the roster, you would not have the cap space for a 35% max free agents. And a lot of times the 35% max are the ones most likely to change teams, especially in the new era of the second apron, because those become the riskiest because you're getting deep into their early 30s, maybe mid 30s. A lot of the guys we've been talking about fit into that bucket. Those are the ones where are most likely you wouldn't even have a max slot available for that. Again, even just with two players under contract. So I think when we're having this conversation, you can pretty much just, if his plan was, I'm going to get expiring contracts again, and those are the only guys I'm going to target because I want to keep flexibility open in that regard. First of all, you can't do that, both because Joel Embiid would rightfully have the, you would understand if he would get pissed off and you would be risking that, but also because you just physically can't fit a max slot underneath those two. So I don't think that's what he would be talking about. Later on in that article, Jake Fischer mentioned bringing in players like a 2-year, like the Pacers did 2 years for Bruce Brown, something like that, maybe doing something similar to that with Klay Thompson or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, balloon payments on short-term deals, maybe that would have a club option on the second year to basically take trade flexibility. He also then brought up striking out on a big-time wing would also leave the door open for Philadelphia to consider taking back a player such as Zach LaVine, sources said, in the event Chicago or another team is willing to attach draft capital to move off of that salary.
Zach.
No!
It's not the Zach we chant for here at PHLY.
Do not sully the Zach Berman chant with the name of Zach LaVine.
So, to sort of just wrap it up, I think if we are talking about a flexibility plan, it would not be a cap space plan because you cannot have enough of a max slot to pursue anyone that you want. It would probably be more like a Bruce Brown type plan or a get more draft picks so you can be flexible on the trade market plan. I think it would be a plan centered around the next trade, not next year's free agency.
And that's what I was going to go and ask you about the trade market, especially around the deadline, of course. Getting there, you can just sit there like you just do nothing.
I've got to figure it out. I've just got to figure out my thing.
Do nothing. Yeah, but
I know I don't do shit with my hands at all, so I've got to come up with my own.
You kind of do.
We'll see.
You
we'll
do.
See.
It's just real subtle.
I'm really just giving.
It's real
Kyle,
subtle.
Kyle's just very demonstrative.
Yeah.
I'm honestly jealous. I'm truthfully jealous.
But if that is the case, as Ramid is saying, playing devil's advocate there in terms of that, going the devil's advocate route, where I was going to go was, yes, could they then focus on what could happen at the trade deadline, kind of pan out and say, hey, this guy might be available if this team doesn't play it. And now you're hoping failure for another team in order to do that, to make that approach your approach as you attack the offseason and not do much. But is there something there where you do just that there are some names that are going to be disgruntled? And when you look at that disgruntled name, because they have the ability to focus out and see who might be available, who may not be available, would you go after said player? Now, it may not be Lowry marketing like we bring up, like a lot of people bring up in the chat and certainly on social media. But
do you know anyone else with 1 year left on his contract?
No,
okay.
I don't. And in the event,
anyone who might be related to somebody on the show.
So just throwing it back at you. What if that is the plan before the injury to Joel Embiid and even DeAnthony Melton a little bit later after they made the Harden deal? We were still talking about them being one of the top 5 teams in the NBA. You still have the money. You still have the flexibility to do it. Tyrese Maxey is locked in. If Kelly Oubre does come back, you see Kelly Oubre again for another year in the system with Nick Nurse. You feel good about that. Maybe there's some other things. What is it going to be so different that they still wouldn't be that top 5 team and not have the ability to make that deal at the trade deadline?
Yeah, so I am less firm on a you can't do this than Kyle is, for sure. What I will say is you cannot, under any circumstance, prioritize cap space for next year. Like, you cannot just go 1-year deals and wait. But in terms of, like, what I don't think they necessarily have to do is I'm going to offer a big contract to whoever I can get. And if that player is not worth it, then so be it. I'm going to, tie this anchor to the franchise and just whatever we can get, we can get. So if that means the 2-year deal thing, I think is interesting. Acquiring other players in a trade along with salary, I'm not opposed to. Like, if you can get to the point where you have 5 or 6 or even more first-round draft picks to offer, and some matching salary that you can get either in a trade with your, like, trading someone into cap space this summer or signing someone to a 2-year deal, I am not 100% against that. But what you have to get back has to be actually have trade value in a future deal. Like, it has to be something that actually gives you flexibility, not just kicks the can down the road. I think Morey's argument would be something similar to how he acquired Harden the first time. It's a series of moves leading up to one. If you do end up in, like I said, after the summer, where you have a couple of significant matching salaries that are not on debilitating long-term deals, and you have like 6 first-round draft picks, you need to see the details, right? You need to see details of what other options were out there, who they end up getting as these, balloon payments or what have you. But I'm not dismissing it just completely out of pocket.
You can't spend 2 seasons hoping someone is going to want to get traded to your team. It's
but like
really that.
It depends what else. Like, if this entire
have to build a team at some point. Like, here's the thing: if you say, all right, Paul George is out, Jimmy Butler's not moving, go down the list. Sorry that it's natural for me, and you're sitting there like a
really
fucking
jealous.
robot
I'm
because
jealous.
anyway.
I'm jealous.
You go down the list, and all these options can't happen. You can't then go into the season and say, well, hopefully the perfect player by the deadline decides they want out. You can't. We've had this conversation before. You can't fucking build a team that wins a title from February to June. That does not happen. The only time, there are like 2 examples in like 25 years of one of the major guys on the team being acquired at the deadline. It's Marc Gasol in 2019, and it was probably what? The 3rd or 4th most important guy. So that's what we're hoping for here.
Yeah.
If that's the example.
Yeah.
And it's trading for Pau Gasol was the only other close one. And they didn't win the title in the first year that they had him. They fucking lost. And those are high-end outcomes. Most outcomes of getting a guy at the deadline, a big piece, are it's a fucking disaster because you have to figure out how to play together.
I mean,
even
we
if they're
are
guys
watching OG and Siakam right now. Well, not right now.
No,
anymore.
we're fucking not. OG's out of the playoffs.
I literally just said that.
OG or Siakam's still in the playoffs because everybody else got hurt. Like, what are we talking about? You don't win by trading for the 3rd guy on February 5th. That just does not happen.
You also first of all,
you're punting another season if this is what you do.
Siakam is literally playing in the conference finals right now. Right now,
they're not winning the title.
I agree with that. But
who fucking cares? We want a fucking participatory trip to the conference finals, and that's good enough. If that's what they're aiming for, no.
If everything happens where we would get to this point where we're having this debate, you're not talking about a player who's going to lift you to the finals anyway. You've already failed. Correct. So why would I tie myself to
away? Have to see, like, try to build the team, do something, move picks for other guys. It doesn't have to be the perfect. We're going to hold every pick we have in the hopes that Danny Ainge is not going to bend you over a fucking barrel for Lauri Markkanen.
My point is you would be building a team that would be maxing out in the 2nd round. You're building a team just to build a team if you don't have a 3rd player that's good enough.
Are you maxing out in the 2nd round if you have to trade literally everything that's not nailed down for Mikal Bridges on February 5th? Yes. They're not getting out of the 2nd round with that team.
That's fine, but then you have something you can build towards. I'm fine with that. Okay. If you get to the point where we're having this conversation, then you have already lost next season. I'm not going to tie myself down to a terrible contract just to salvage it.
Well, then you might as well trade Joel at that point.
Disagree completely.
He will be coming up on 1 year left on his deal.
Sure, and they're going to extend him.
Okay. Good luck with it.
My whole point is if we get to the point where this is a debate, you're going to need good luck no matter what because you're pretty
That
fine.
is absolutely
That's
true.
so, I'm just not committing the next mistake just to try to salvage
Well, what
something
is
this
the
summer.
next mistake? I'm not saying to go out and throw $45 million at like some no-name player, but I'm saying you can't approach it as we're just going to sign a bunch of expiring guys.
See, but
you can't do that.
I said that. How are we having this conversation when I said that right off the top?
Well, what is the plan then?
That's a good question. That's why I said the details matter.
That's why
But
we're talking
like a
about it,
2-year
folks.
balloon payment, that's fine.
What is the plan? Could this be an alternate plan for Daryl Morey? And look, and Gene also brought up Rashid in 04. Appreciate it, Gene. Good one. Definitely won the title there. Got back the next year, lost. Definitely a great pickup there for Rasheed Wallace. But that team was already really put together. He put them over the top, bringing in
And
Rasheed
again, it's
Wallace.
20 years ago.
And that's 20 years ago.
And it's maybe the
Yes.
most outlier team in the history of championship teams in the NBA.
Right. Yes. Now, they do have 2 Hall of Famers, maybe 3, maybe 4 on that team, but that team 20 years ago looked at totally different than a lot of these other clubs. We all agree that the plan has to be to go into the offseason and get something done, not overpaying just to overpay. Derek is right, and Kyle is also right that you cannot go in there without a plan to make sure that you build this thing right now and put a product on the floor next season when you don't do this for a second consecutive year. Throwing the alternative out there was just a discussion point of what they do. And not only are these 2 right about it, most of you are, as we said, from the very, very top, you're punting Daryl Morey if something like that happens. And Joel is probably asking his way out of the city if that does, in fact, come to play for this basketball team. So they have to go in there and approach it. I do have a question for the guys in the alternative with the other 2, throwing the names out there, Klay Thompson, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Are those names
Well, one of those guys is still good.
Of any interest when we get back and we discuss those 2 as part of this basketball team potentially for the next season?
I'm very curious to tease that topic.
Yes.
Who is interested in paying Klay Thompson that also doesn't want Paul George? And I'd be curious if you actually watched either of them play this year.
Love it. Love it. All right.
All right, so as we talk about trying to give these Sixers the cure for their early
vaccinate
playoff
yourself
exits,
now from that
we want to tell
discussion.
you about vaccines. Protect yourself and your family by staying up to date on your immunizations. Rite Aid pharmacists are specially trained certified immunizers. Did you know that most vaccines are no cost with insurance or through government plans like Medicare Part D? Rite Aid pharmacists can vaccinate for COVID-19, shingles, pneumonia, tetanus, whooping cough, chickenpox, and more. Select Rite Aid stores have a dedicated pharmacist ready to administer vaccines and to answer all of your questions. If you have questions on what immunizations you need, if you're not sure if you're up to date, or if you're feeling nervous to ask questions, a Rite Aid pharmacist will take the time to make personalized recommendations based on your health history and discuss any concerns. No questions are too small. Just walk in or schedule an appointment Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. State, age, and health restrictions may apply. Ask a Rite Aid pharmacist for details.
And right now, as I take a look at the squad right now, the baseball team, and we know, still remaining very, very hot. They're tied right now in the 4th with Texas as the game is ongoing. And if you want a live bet, I have the place for you to go, and that is with our great friends from BetParx Sportsbook app. We are brought to you today by BetParx app. Money is in the moments, and right now, in the moment, 1-1 right now. I believe it's the bottom of the 4th right now, so Philadelphia up at the plate, and we'll see what happens there, see if they can pick up yet another victory before they go on the road. And if you are looking at them and you want to feel like, you know what, they're going to put a 4 spot up in the 6th inning to break this game wide open, you go to BetParx Sportsbook app to make sure that you place your bet to win with the all-day action. Win your first $10 bet and earn $125 in sports bonus bets. You play for fun. You love to win. You bet. Download the app and play along with us. Must be 21 or older. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Now, the names that we mentioned before we took a quick break there, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Klay Thompson. How much would you be betting on Klay Thompson if you were, if he's in the Sixers uniform? How many threes in a game on BetParx Sportsbook app? How many threes in that game? How many points? Would you be winning? Would you be losing? Where would you be? We haven't talked
You'd
much
be giving
about
up a lot
Klay
of points
Thompson.
on the defensive
exactly.
end.
We haven't talked much about Klay Thompson because We know that's not a name that a lot of people are leaning to. Seeing him in the latter part of his years with Golden State, they're looking totally different. He's not as good as he used to be. He's not the two-way player that he used to be anymore. Kyle, you brought up the factor of the injury history, of course, and then the play in general.
The just not being good.
Not being good anymore. Yeah. But his name is his name. And if it's not Golden State, maybe someone does pay him that 1+1 type of deal, give him a balloon payment, as you guys mentioned. The difference there between he and Paul George is Paul George is still all-star level type of player with Klay Thompson.
The guy who got all NBA anymore. Votes versus someone who got taken out of the lineup for a rookie.
Right. So where would the interest level be? Clearly for you, it doesn't seem like it there, but for the Sixer fans out there.
I mean, look, here's the problem with Klay Thompson. It's not that he can't play a role. It's that the money that you would want to sign him for, there would be no reason for him to leave Golden State.
Right.
Like, he's been there so long. He's leaving at this point to get a major payday. And like, I understand that, right? He's won everything there is to win in Golden State. Decorated career, beloved player there. I don't think anyone with the Warriors, including fans, are going to begrudge him if Orlando, for example, was like, hey, we'll give you 3 for $90 or 3 for $75, like whatever it might be.
I would never.
That would be insane.
I would not have any interest in that.
No shot I would give him that type of money. Would I be interested in like mid-level ranges? Sure, because I do think the high volume
like 225, 230, something like that. Or would you go 3 or 4 years? I would not.
I prefer KCP
2 to 3 years, I think. Preferably a 1+1, honestly, but you might be able to convince me somewhere in the 2 to 3 range if the dollar value is low enough. But I think at that point he just stays in Golden State. Like, maybe they are so concerned with what their tax bill has been that they say we're not paying that regardless. He physically is just in such a worse place now than prior to the knee and Achilles injuries that he suffered, that he went from being a reliable, at times even like genuinely great perimeter defender to he is a turnstile. Like, he is exactly what we've talked about on the show, like someone who's not going to help with point of attack or perimeter defense where you're getting beat a lot, you're putting lots of pressure on Joel, and so that's impacting his rebounding. He's forced to move around a lot more. And then on the other end of the floor, he's just not as dynamic in terms of the movement and the off-ball shooting. I think peak Klay Thompson, like we've said with Paul George, would have been an incredible fit next to Joel Embiid, depending on who the other guy is, who the primary creator is on the perimeter. I don't see it anymore. He's too much of a stationary guy. Like, he'd be fine. He'd be great in a role where he's in the weak side corner on a Joel post-up, ball swings to him. He certainly is going to hit a lot of threes on the weak side in a swing situation. But am I paying a premium for that? Probably not, because if he comes here or goes anywhere but Golden State, he's going to expect a role befitting whatever money he makes and the stature he's had in his career. I'm just not willing to give him that based on the decline we've seen over multiple seasons now. This is because, look, there have been guys
ever since he came back from the injuries.
Correct. Like, there have been guys, I think James Harden, Chris Paul are probably two good examples of guys that had one down season, like really bad year after injuries, and it was the same, both hammies, right? Both hamstring injuries. They came back and people were like, oh, that guy might be washed, blah, blah, blah. And then still were able to, after that, bounce back, have very productive careers. The issue with Klay at this point is this is like a 3-year downturn. This is not, hey, he had a bad year shooting, or hey, he had one bad defensive year on a Golden State team that's kind of stuck between eras. I have been concerned about him for a long time now. So, yeah, I don't have much interest in him at any kind of high dollar value, and certainly not the years. You could convince me if everything falls through and it's just like, hey, we'll pay you 1 year at a crazy number. Okay, maybe, but I still...
Like a JJ type of number, or was that too high? Because JJ got, what, 20, 21? That first year?
I mean, that was a very different collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah,
like 20,
right.
Yeah, I'd do 20 now.
I think I'd do 1 for 20, yeah. But even so, it still goes back to what I was
Well, and then if you do that, you can set
about.
yourself up for free agency next summer.
But it's what I'm saying. It's like part of the reason I don't like hope a trade becomes available is they do need to build a real team at some point. You can't just every single season turn it over and turn it over. There does need to be some degree of continuity and cohesion and understanding between Joel, Tyrese, and whoever else is out there on the floor with them. And I just don't know how you accomplish that if your fallback plan is, well, we're going to sign guys to multiple 1 for 25 or 1 for 20, 2 for 50 type of deals, knowing that they're likely to move on and you're still waiting for the cavalry to come.
So my response to that, since I feel like that's what this show is, there isn't continuity usually in the 5 through 10. The continuity you need is get that third player locked down, and then you can find the supporting pieces. What we're debating here, first, and again, to be clear, we both agreed 1-year deals to preserve cap space, complete non-starter. No go, absolutely. Really what you need to do to have tradable contracts to make that next jump, because if the Sixers strike out on their third star, Daryl is going to be third star hunting. That's just going to be the way that this team is operated on, and I don't necessarily disagree. Everything is going to be in flux until that happens. The way you build a team and the way you get tradable contracts are largely the same. You pursue guys who would play better in your environment than they have elsewhere, sign them to good deals that can be traded in the future, so you get the best of both worlds. You get both a team being built in a short term and tradable contracts and draft picks that can be used to get a third star if they ever become
Sounds
available.
like 3 for 75 for Kelly Oubre, baby.
Oh, God, no. So really,
Phil, where you at?
while we had a little bit of a manufactured debate to start, really what Kyle and I are arguing for is pretty much the same thing. The way you build a team is the same way as you build tradable trade chips. It's just the details are going to be very important. It's really hard to debate this because, like Klay, could Klay be, if you had Klay in the Buddy Hield role, could he succeed in that? Sure. I don't want to give him a contract more than 2 years in length. But if you give him one for this year and next year, that's a reasonable price, and you could use him at least as salary filler. You could both fill a role and give you some kind of stability, and then also be tradable if a star does become available, especially if you still have 4 or 5 or 6 draft picks to trade. If you get someone like KCP, absolutely that could be tradable. And frankly, at this stage, I would prioritize KCP over Klay Thompson, which I never thought I would say at any point in their respective basketball
Pretty
careers.
easily,
But
too.
I think we're at that point. But if you can get him on I don't think you can get him on a 2-year deal. First of all, I think that would have to be a 4-year. But if it's a player like that that you believe will be a contributor over the course of a 3 or 4-year contract, I'm not against that either. I think like I said, what Kyle and I are arguing for is largely the same thing. You have to get good players on team-friendly deals, or at least deals that don't have negative trade value. And if that, hopefully that would lead to building a team too, because the only way for them to have trade value or for their trade value to increase is for them to succeed in the roles. It's largely the same thing.
And the reason why you just kind of went over the KCP part, just reason by, is because, look, many of you have been in here before, but for the new people who are joining the show, we've talked about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, even with the others, because just as a piece that goes along as you get that third guy, superstar type player, but then you add a role player like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, maybe, depending on what the contract looks like, because that's the type of player that you want, of course, as a wing player, defensively, two-way player, can knock down shots, not afraid to put the ball down on the floor and finish at the basket as well. So champion twice already and played a big role in both. And that when we bring up the Klay Thompson part, he was just linked to Klay Thompson in the story from Jake Fischer that we had to bring him up. But again, bringing him up now is just a part of the combination with Klay Thompson, because we've talked about him before, even if you were to acquire one of those other star players like Paul George, the names that we thrown out there, Jimmy Butler, in the event that you could add that player to the team. So
I would say
he's
too,
a really good fit on any team. Just like somebody said that Klay Thompson can fit on any team, Hall of Fame Klay Thompson, for what he was, which is why they won so many championships. Now the role that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope plays in this NBA, in today's NBA, he can fit with any team in the league, and that would be a nice fit here. But
I would say, too, on the KCP front, the goal should be who's the next KCP? Who can we get that? And actually, a guy, so you're thinking he came from Detroit. They were a miserable team, as they've been for a long time. Role player on a crappy team, a directionless team. I'd be looking at some guys we talked about from Atlanta, like, you know, a DeAndre Hunter.
Sure.
Like, now he's not available as a free agent, but that's somebody that fits that role of like a two-way type of wing, maybe pops some more on a better team, certainly has the requisite athleticism, switchability, inconsistent as a shooter, but pretty good shooter. That's the sort of guy that you got to try to find those types of players rather than, all right, we're paying for, because if you're talking about balloon payments, I don't really care if it's a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, that's not killing you. But if it gets to the point where KCP's after, you know, 4-year deals and that he's opting out not for $25 million a year, but to get like a 4 for 60, a 4 for 80, whatever that is, that's when I think you have to recalibrate and say, all right, well, who's a younger guy that might want out of a crappy situation? Can I trade a first to get a guy like that and use a little bit of your draft capital in that way? Which is not to say, like, I don't think Daryl will do that. I think Daryl wants the guys that are ready. I think he wants KCP while he's KCP, not the guy who might be that type of championship level role player in 2026 or 2027. Like, this is all about who is good enough to get it done now. But that's how I would personally try to look at it. You got to try to look at some of the ascending guys too.
And I saw that someone, Eric Delgado in the chat, mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith. Dorian Finney-Smith is a nice name. He's just 31. We're just talking about the younger players.
I think he fits in that KCP
just
type.
More of, as you said, the
more
younger
of the finished product.
For when KCP left Detroit to get to where he is now, same thing. Dorian Finney-Smith is fine, just if a younger. And you could probably get Dorian Finney-Smith at a decent price if you're willing to pay that.
And Mets are playing hardball
deal
with him, allegedly.
Yeah.
That was the reporting leading into the deadline. Because I don't think the Sixers were ever really in on him because of that. What I had heard was Brooklyn is setting a really high line.
No, because wasn't he shooting like 40% from three at that point? And everyone's like, that's not real. We don't believe it. And they were trying to value him like.
But you did also see him play well with that Dallas team in that role.
Right, he's been a good. He became a good playoff guy over time. Like, has had some good moments, but he ended up under 35% from three for the season. So,
and they definitely left him open a lot. I watched a lot of those, of course, and he would be open a lot. He would hit, knock down a few, of course, have those games. But
defensively, I really like him. Like, he's a good defensive guy, especially for the playoffs, where I think he can size up and down, but. Yeah, not someone that I'm paying an extraordinary price for.
And he has 2 years left, player option in the 25-26 season. So, like you said, they're going to play hardball. And he's on a good contract, 14, 9, and then 15 the following season.
But that is the kind of player, because he's under contract for a couple of years and it's a reasonable deal, that you would satisfy both of those, build a team, but also remain flexible to pounce the next time a star becomes available.
Movable. 100%.
Because it's 100%. Yeah. The question comes in if it costs you multiple draft picks. That's when it's like, well, no, I need those draft picks for the trade. And that's where the sort of like the debate over whether or not they build a team now, prioritize that, or prioritize next star, that's where it really becomes a discussion, which one you need to keep those picks or not.
Calvin said, Mikal Bridges, Devon, trade for your cousin. Well, I don't want to trade for my cousin. He's already my cousin. I don't need to trade him again. But yes, for Daryl Morey, yes, he could try to trade.
Come on, Daryl. Bring him home.
Try to trade.
Right the wrongs of
for my guy.
I'll send one of my cousins to Brooklyn. That's fine. That's fine.
Good one.
I don't even really like them all anyway.
Sorry, I'm not trading any family members.
That's what I'm saying.
I like my family.
I'm not going to trade my cousin. He's already my cousin.
Well, guys, if you have family members you want to trade or any other day-to-day annoyances like Derek yelling at you across the desk, even though we mostly agree.
I don't think I yelled at all. I think that was all you.
Yeah,
Remember, when Kyle's speaking loudly, he's not angry.
There were some raised voices in the room. If there are raised voices in your room and you need to settle down and simmer down, just remember, guys, you can always choose chill and then reach for an ice-cold Coors Light as Devon gives Derek a look off camera as we speak.
Actually,
I think I was looking at past.
I don't know. False accusations. I really do need to choose chill over here. I'm seeing ghosts. But guys, with Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice cold beer when the mountains turn blue on those bottles and cans as they hit the perfect temperature. Told you guys earlier this week, I believe, Memorial Day weekend coming up. People are going to start going to the beaches, going down the shore. you're going to be fighting for space on the beach, right? Like you want that
Absolutely.
prime real estate. You want the right amount of sun, the right amount of distance from the ocean. Sometimes people are playing music and you're not a music person. Sometimes you're playing music.
Fair point.
And the people near you are like, turn that nonsense off.
You're playing the PHLY Sixers podcast.
Maybe you're listening to a podcast and
up.
saying, hey, let me see Kyle make hand motions and Derek try to replicate them. And you find yourself on one end of an argument or another.
Never, ever do that.
Regardless, you can always choose chill with a cold layered, cold filtered, cold packaged Coors Light that has a smooth finish, mountain cold refreshment, no matter where you are, whether it's in the PHLY studios, at the beach, across the country, around the world. When you choose to rise above it all, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
And folks, told you just a little bit earlier, maybe about 15 minutes ago, about the Phils. Maybe they'll have one of those innings where they just turn it up.
They're about to win their 29. Well, they're vying to win their 29th game of their last 35. That's a wild run. It's a I legitimately can't remember anything like that.
It was just 1-1. It's now 4-1. Yeah. So they had that one crooked inning. Maybe they'll have another because that's how good they are. But if you are looking, say, you know what? I've heard about it. I've seen it on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday afternoon. Now Thursday afternoon when that ballpark is filled up. But maybe there's a seat left for you. You can go to our friends from Game Time because they are an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer to first pitch. If you wanted to start your weekend early, right? You're off on Friday. You know what? Before we go down to the shore, as Kyle said, let's go to the baseball game. We're not going to waste our time. That's going to be a good game. Let's go see Philadelphia win their potentially 30th or 29th of their
29th, yep.
Of their 30 in their last 35. That's an amazing number. So you definitely know it's worth it. Pick out any game there, of course, for the Phils. If you miss this one, then when they get back to town and they're still red hot, you want to get down to the ballpark. It's going to be the month of June. You know the weather is much better. That's how I prefer it. You got to get down there. Last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy Major League Baseball tickets, and for every kind of event in your area. Views from all seats in the venue, and just a heads up, there's not a bad seat in that stadium in South Philadelphia. Just saying. Lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. Don't forget about last-minute deals. Save up to 60% buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. That's what will be soon, theater for the PHLY Sixers group here. Maybe we'll pull some of the other guys in there. We talked about Zach. Maybe Zach will be joining this potentially too. We talked about him. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code PHLY for your $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY right on your app on your phone like I have right here for $20 off. Download the Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. There was another name mentioned in there we kind of glossed over, but I do want to get maybe a little bit, like 5 minutes on this player since we mentioned it briefly and the chat went off. Everybody's in agreement, no on this player. No on Zach LaVine. We talked about him during the season. We talked about him during the trade deadline. Zach LaVine, saw him at the Clutch Pro Day yesterday, dapping up LeBron and Anthony Davis as the Clutch clients, most notably Bronny. Seemed like he had a nice workout. But Zach LaVine, again.
How many draft picks would it take for you to take him on?
A decent amount. What would irritate me the most is the full season of we have no interest in Zach LaVine to just be like, well,
Kyle doesn't care about the contracts. He cares about being lied to.
No, it's not even the being lied to part. It's to go through the whole like, well, listen, we just Zach LaVine's not a fit. Like, you take a look at that contract and the new CBA, and then like you have 2 or 3 players in free agency slip through your hands, and you're like, well, all our principles and our beliefs went out the window. That would make me side eye a lot of people in the organization. I put it that. It's less about It's less about how truthful they are to me than looking at them as so wishy-washy that I wouldn't believe in their ability to have a real vision for the team moving forward. Because it would very clearly be a marriage of convenience rather than one of love and affection.
And this is one that the consensus for everybody is typically no. It just as we bring the name up, and I'm looking at the chat, ooh, I hate Maroon 5, and no, and all of this for him, no, get him out of here, no, all of that, no.
Which is funny because I feel
nobody
like
wants him because the player certainly can score the basketball.
Yeah.
He's athletic, he can shoot, he's not afraid to put up the volume of threes that we talk about. But the consensus is really no on Zach LaVine.
I feel like the consensus has swung even more because when we were talking about him in like December and January, I feel like there was at least some pushback on the no. There were some people in his camp. Now it seems pretty universal, which surprised me a little bit, but I also agree with them. So, yeah, that's exactly like when I say you can kick the can down the road, which is a phrase that I hate, but I'm just using it because it gets people going. It's because I would much rather do that than we struck out on plan A through H. Fuck it, let's get Zach LaVine. He's a name, he can score. Let's try to.
I agree with you there. If that's the fallback rather than the
can't do that,
kick the can,
and you can't do 1 year deals. Those are my two can'ts. Everything else, it depends on the details.
I think so. I've talked a lot about living with red flags on this show. He's got way too many.
You talking about one of your cousins again now, or
it's one thing to live with. Okay, this guy is a little bit shaky as a defender. Okay, this guy's health history. Okay, this guy's contract. He's got like 3 major red flags, which are all those things I just mentioned. Now, if you want to try to spin zone it, you would say, well, maybe he would buy in defensively on a more consistent basis on a team that has some direction. My counter would be the teams he's played for didn't have direction in part because Zach LaVine was one of the foundational pieces, right? Like I saw some people earlier compare acquiring LaVine to Dallas buying low on Kyrie. Well, number one, we had already seen Kyrie play at a high level in the playoffs, and that would include on both ends. Like I would say I've generally been a Kyrie defensive skeptic over the years, but he has shown when he wants to, he can be and has been in big moments, at least like I can guard my guy type of defender. LaVine is just like disinterested most of the time when you watch him. And the only reason Kyrie was available was not about basketball reasons. So this is most of the Zach LaVine stuff is all about basketball and all about how his archetype and how people view him has declined over the last however many years. 43,
45, 48 over the next 3 years too. To go with that as far as his contract. No.
Not doing it.
Yeah, no. Let's get to the super chat here that we've had a few. Let's go to Chris first. Chris Talisma. Am I saying that right? I hope I'm saying that right. Do you guys pronounce it differently? What's up, Chris? We appreciate it. Do we still want Bridges if Brooklyn demands we also take Ben Simmons back?
You guys can't do this to me, man. Derek is all in. I don't.
Absolutely.
I think if it's just this year,
bring back Ben.
If it's just 1 year and I can tell him to go fucking play video games in his man cave or whatever,
still has his place, doesn't he? Yeah.
Can he get it from Castellanos?
Probably.
No. Why would he give him? He's gonna sell him the house back because he's coming back. Like why would he buy a multi-million-dollar house and then be like, "Oh, you're coming back to town? Yeah, here, take it back. I'm gonna
just asking questions and not to Kyrie. Just asking questions.
Do you think he's removed the Simo the Savage neon lights?
That would have been the first thing to go.
Yeah, he probably did. Probably did. Maybe like, get this out of here.
Maybe he should focus more on his plate discipline. I don't,
that will never change.
By the way, somebody said, "I wish Dombrowski was running the Sixers." I think he'd be in for a rude awakening when you can't just throw money at everything.
It does make it harder. Yeah,
it's a little bit different. Now, it's no shade on. Obviously, he's built who is currently the best team in baseball. It's slightly different with the non-salary cap in baseball.
Would you lean more Howie?
Bring back Ben.
In that regard? Howie Roseman?
Each sport is so different. Just like Zach talked about it on the show we did beginning of the week, Devon, where in football, the contracts, half of them are just like, it's not even real money. You can just cut guys when they're not good, and you can completely remake the team in an offseason between 7-round draft and all the future picks that you can stock up and all that. And like you're getting real contributors in deep rounds in a lot of cases. That's just, you can't do that in the NBA.
Yeah.
Well, you can, but it's a lot harder and it's a lot less consistent.
Well, Jay the Jungle says, if it means bringing Kale here, sure. Yes.
I think that's probably right. Because at this point, it's just 1 year. It's not, and it's having no real impact on your team building.
That's what I said at the trade deadline.
Yeah, but I couldn't deal with a season and a half. There's 1 year is different than I have to think about this guy during this playoff run and the next one.
To get that third piece in place, I will go through a lot of unpleasantries, including covering Ben Simmons again.
Oh my God!
All right, let's get to the next one. Shahid Abdul Hadi. Kyle is about to fight over Siakam. LOL. From the earlier discussion.
Look, one thing you learn working with Kyle, and he has said this multiple times, just because I'm yelling doesn't mean I'm angry. So you kind of just realize when you wind Kyle up, you're going. And to be honest, like we expected this, and we talked about sort of like the position before the show, so none of this was surprising. But yeah, when you wind Kyle up, and that's part of why I tried to get like the hand thing going. Maybe I could wind Kyle up a little bit too. It's good theater. It's good theater.
Right.
So there was a lot of stuff in Jake's report that we haven't discussed. So I think, one of them, LeBron is not leaving LA, which I think I always felt that way.
If you have been listening to this show and watching this show, most of what we're about to say, we told you a while ago. Like when we
keep you pretty informed on this show,
and about things like that. Like I don't think LeBron's leaving LA. I think we have a pretty good track record on tea leaf reading like that.
Here's the other one that I do think, because we had a lot of Knicks fans crashing our comments, allegedly. I didn't actually look, but our Discord server was like, these cockroaches are
got a couple of tweets
are
too.
all over the. Well, yeah. But I expect it there. So Jake in his story said, while league personnel are of the mind, Siakam, speaking of, will certainly be re-signing with Indiana.
He's still playing basketball?
Only technically. There was word circling among team officials at last week's NBA draft combine that Anunoby's situation with the Knicks is not as cut and dried. Perhaps those signals to rival teams will only help Anunoby elicit a larger dollar figure from the Knicks, but various teams left Chicago with the belief that Anunoby could reach unrestricted free agency and consider deals from franchises in addition to New York, sources said. So that is a second data point now of two people who I believe are plugged in, well regarded as reporters. Both of them are based out of New York. So, and they're hearing this from, various people, different parties. Derek was very excited about the potential of, potentially getting Anunoby as your option in free agency. It's at least worth noting that as you get these little breadcrumbs leading up to July 1st, that there's a little more smoke building here, and that if Paul George stays in LA, which I still believe is more likely than not, that this is at least this would be an amazing fallback plan.
Yes,
you could make an argument it should be plan A rather than, hey, we're trying to lure a LA guy away from LA when Steve Ballmer is more than likely just going to pony up in the end.
What do you know about the Nurse relationship with Anunoby?
I think they're mostly
fine. Yeah. I don't know that it's
not like
great.
DeMar DeRozan or Kyle Lowry levels great, but it's certainly not Pascal Siakam. It's in the middle.
No, right. And that's why I think the Sixers were comfortable going to Toronto pre-deadline and saying, hey, we're interested. What's it going to take? And they came out of that knowing we just didn't have what Toronto wanted, which was the picks and the young players. And it was the young player component that stopped them. So they are going to be in the Anunoby market if he makes it there. And it certainly looks like there's increased belief around the league that he could be there. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Yeah. If I had to tea leaf read this one, I think certainly the talks have not been what OG's camp wants.
Yes.
That's why everyone's being told this at the exact same time. But I also think the Knicks don't trade for him if they don't at least consider signing him at the number that OG wants, because again, they would have known that number better than anyone. I think what's probably going on is I think the Sixers are mucking up a lot of teams' plans right now. Like if the Knicks are hoping to get him on a deal, they can't while the Sixers still have space. So I think everyone's just kind of waiting to see what the Sixers do.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if the Knicks let him walk, is what I would say. I think it's just they're not giving the contract offer now because why would they? Because if the Sixers go off the board, then they don't have to. But we're in a holding pattern.
I'll ask you this because I was going to.
I love this show. I love this show.
Thank you, cuz.
You know the voice.
Give it to the cuz, everybody.
I was wondering why everyone was looking at me. I'm like, did I say something stupid? Do I have something on my face? What's going on? No, it's because
I was wondering if he was just going to bust in the door.
I'm going to ask you because Derek got pretty deep into Anunoby yesterday.
Yep.
How would you, if let's say they had their choice, or you have your choice, Anunoby at $40 a year, $40 million to be clear, $40 a year. I'll take it certainly. $40 million a year for Anunoby over the next 4 years, or Paul George at the max.
And since Anthony just busted in the door and said what he said, we were talking about this just briefly where he asked me who would I prefer, and I said of the wish list of everybody, I would still lean Paul George. Mm-hmm. But if we're going that he's a real possibility, OG Anunoby, at that number that you just talked about, I would lean more of the OG Anunoby piece. Of course, fingers crossed that his health is good and that he can just simply play and be available for you. But he answers a lot of questions on the defensive end. And with the scoring and the offense that you already have with Embiid and Maxey, I would love for them to have somebody with the perimeter defense that he provides that George and Butler still have in them. But when we talk about at the highest level right now, if healthy, he's in that top 5 for all NBA first defensive team again, and even in the conversation of winning an all defensive player of the year type of award, because that's how special he is on the defensive end, on the perimeter. So I would lean OG Anunoby because of the youth, because of what he brings to the defensive side, and he does just enough on the offensive end where I think that will help them tremendously. And then when you do build out around that, there's still room for others to still thrive and do certain things on the offensive end as well. But he makes things so much easier on the defensive side that leads to that offense that would make them really, really good defensively. So when we credit New York for what they do, Jalen Brunson's fantastic offensively. We do the same thing with the Minnesota Timberwolves with their offense. But one of the things that we focus on in the postseason is, man, these teams are good defensively. Mm-hmm. And we harped on it big time.
I mean, that's why Minnesota had the comeback against Denver. Denver scored 37 points in the second half. And that Denver team is a juggernaut offensively.
And we put so much value and importance on DeAnthony Melton because he's just good enough defensively to make this team again special on that defensive end. And we've talked about how Kelly Oubre has improved defensively and looks so good as a defender because we also know that it still has a big time impact on what you do in terms of winning. Yes, when we talked about offense, you still score, you still outscore people, and you still have an opportunity to win these games, even with Donovan Mitchell being here and I'm putting a crooked number on teams. But defense matters in a big way. And when Prophet One says, Devon, what kind of defense are you watching? We're just talking about the profile of what they were as the defense of George and Butler always being good defensive guys. They're not there anymore, which is why I say the OG Anunoby part I would lean to as my first choice if he's really, really available. That's where I would lean.
The only real reason I would hesitate is the injury history.
Yeah.
That's significant. If it was $35 million a year, I think it would be, you could certainly make a case that he would be a top priority, both because of the age and the way that he would fit into a, space the floor. And he's shot well, but he's also had seasons where he's taken 5, 6, 7 threes per game. You would hope maybe he can get that volume up a little bit more playing off of Embiid and Maxey. It would be a real, real good fit. And like I said, the extra versatility that saving anywhere from $9 to $14 million on that cap slot for that third significant player would be huge. It would be huge.
Derek, is it possible to sign OG at that number and acquire Markkanen into cap space? Do they have enough?
At 40. So I think if he was slotted in at 40, they would have I think they would. I'd have to do some quick math, but I think they would.
There you go. There's dream off season. Sign OG, trade everything not nailed down for Lowry.
Man.
Is it Lowry or Laurie? I never know how to. I've heard people say it two different ways. One day, if he ever plays here, I'll ask him and we'll figure it out. But
Markkanen with 2 Ks. I don't know.
Markkanen, OG, Joel, Maxey,
and throw in
the three of us.
As one.
And we're walking to a title.
As one. And he also mentioned, Jake did in the story, the Donovan Mitchell piece, since we focused on him last week, and Derek talked about it earlier in the week when he got back here. The Donovan Mitchell side, Derek, he did say that, it was enough for him to mention him in the story that if things don't go right and he doesn't get that extension in Cleveland, that we weren't off to talk about it, at least as a discussion point on the show.
Look, we have a lot of shows to fill. Like, if they're brought up, we'll probably talk about it. But no, he reinforced that the Sixers would be in that conversation.
Right.
We'll
and that's going
back to your point. Like, we can sit here and say, like, I think it's probably most likely that OG stays in New York, and I think it's probably most likely that Paul George stays in LA, and yada, yada, yada. The key is there's a lot of options out there, and just one of them has to happen. So sort of the debate that we centered the show off of, I would guess that that's not going to be one we're going to be talking about in July. I don't think we're going to end up saying he's positioning himself for the next move. I do think the next move is going to happen. It's just which one happens, which of these, I don't even want to say low percentage chance, but which of these uncertain things ends up falling through. We'll see. But I'd be surprised if they strike out on everything.
Also, they did let go of their head coach, J.B. Bickerstaff. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much that means to what he didn't like J.B. Bickerstaff, or he just, whatever it is, I don't know if that changes anything as far as Donovan Mitchell maybe staying in Cleveland now. I don't know. I don't know enough there to say that they had a disgruntled relationship or anything along those lines.
That was the reporting around it. Now, how true any of that is, we never really know. And how, let's say they didn't have a good relationship. Is that the difference between Donovan Mitchell staying in Cleveland and extending and Donovan Mitchell leaving? I'd say probably not. I think that's his vision is probably higher than that. Mm-hmm. Are we competing for titles? 2, and this is connected to point 1, what does the roster look like around me, and how well does everything else fit? I think certainly the relationship with the coach matters a lot, but I don't think Bickerstaff being the coach or not is going to be the decisive factor for a Mitchell extension in Cleveland.
And J.B. Bickerstaff let go earlier on this Thursday, no longer the coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I mean, the guy took over and turned things around, and he gets fired after 2 playoff appearances. Last year, they should not have got knocked out by the Knicks in the first round. Bad. That was bad. But this year, they did get to the second round they weren't beating Boston.
Yeah, no,
they weren't.
Look, when teams come up short, first, the coach is the easiest to change, so they tend to be changed first. But also the players are frustrated because they came up short, and players don't tend to look internally and blame themselves. So if the coach is the easiest to change and the players are upset or frustrated with the coach, this happens.
How many
it doesn't really come down to whether or not it's deserved or not.
Altman get, though? How many opportunities did Kobe Altman get? He's the next one, maybe.
Yeah. It feels like they seem like they're at least semi-content with him, right? Unless you have a transcendent guy in Cleveland, he's done a relatively good job of building at least a competent team. I don't think, unless you're completely delusional, and maybe Dan Gilbert is, but it doesn't seem like he's trying to force the GM out the door. They've got Jared Allen is very good. Mm-hmm. It's just whether he fits with Evan Mobley and helps with his development. Darius Garland, I think, is good. I just don't think he's a great fit next to Donovan Mitchell. So they have moves to make. They have options depending on how things break this summer with Mitchell. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But it's just good to know that the Sixers are keeping their eyes open on Mitchell too. I think because we had some debates about his fit and whether they should do it or not. But I think as long as you're at least open to that sort of idea that says we'll be in for an interesting summer no matter what.
And the guy who's going to get paid also this summer, Tyrese Maxey, we discussed it yesterday, did not make the All-NBA team, one of the 3 teams that was announced on Wednesday night. We thought he would be on the outside looking in, and that was exactly right. He did finish in the top 4 in the voting of the next group of getting those votes, and he did not make the first team. Laid that one out perfectly. Jokic, Giannis, Tatum, along with in the backcourt, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka Doncic, and Tyrese Maxey squeezed out as we discussed.
There was just, look, we named every single player who made it were guys that we said yesterday where those were the exact candidates for those spots. Mm-hmm. There was no surprise guy. Like we brought up Jaylen Brown. He was the last man out. He was the closest to being in that didn't get in. I don't think you can really the only guy that I think is even really debatable is Halliburton. Like Halliburton's playoff run has overshadowed that second half of the season. He was just kind of Now he was great, was awesome to start the season, but was just kind of okay for several months. I'm certainly not going to cause a fuss over Maxey not making it over him. And I know we talked about it on the show. I believe Derek and I both tweeted about it yesterday. Just to be clear, this has no impact on this summer for the Sixers. This is all about what Tyrese will be making moving forward and how it affects the cap in future years.
Yep, and it will have an impact in future years, like the apron, the second apron, luxury tax, eventually after that, repeater tax if you've done it a couple times. It will impact all of that. Like that is $8 to $9 million per year less that you will be paying Tyrese Maxey. But it does not impact their cap space that they have to sign anyone or trade for anyone. Over the summer, he will have a $13 million cap hold regardless.
All right, time for a roll call.
Roll call, baby.
Time for a roll call.
Hello and thank you to everybody today. Thank you to Guard Mello, to our friend Puppas overseas.
What
Barbara
up, Puppas?
Carroll.
Barb.
Prophet One. Ramid.
Mid, what's happening, Mid?
Sean Sharp. Money Mar. Excuse me. Liam Stevens. Bill Morris. Hinky Process. Shout out to Sam
like
Hinky.
I don't like it.
Thank you to Calvin, to Matt L, to Trilligan. I like that one.
What up, Trill?
Chris, is that Talisma? Did we have a debate about that earlier? He was our super chat, one of our super chatters.
He got back and said it was correct.
Perfect.
Yes.
We have Joaquin from Cherry Hill. We have on my own yams now! Exclamation point.
Two
as
yams.
Always.
2 yams.
Lost Sleep TV. Ed Wright. Bill Morris, who is doomering all over the chat today saying, it's over. They're all cooked or they're not good enough. Bill, choose chill, my friend. That's what I'd say to you. But thank you for coming through.
Kyle spent the first 20 minutes of this show yelling, and he's telling people to choose
Mike
chill.
S. Bootzilla.
Boots.
Randy Rubart. Shout out to Randy.
What's happening, Randy? It's been a while. Even
Jay of the Jungle. Maine. Who else we got
What up,
in here
Maine?
today? I'm sure my guy Will was in here. Shout out once again to our guy Al, the 2-minute warning.
What up, Al?
Brian Knight in the house. Alex McCoy in the house.
Alex.
Just buying me time so I can scroll further and further up the list of names.
What up, Prophet?
We have The Truth. We have my girl Winona. How could I forget?
Nona.
We got Haidar, another one of our overseas friends. Jonathan Chen.
Johnny.
Akil McKnight, who said, and I quote, we got to punt Morey if he punts the season. I can't say I agree with you, but I certainly sympathize. Chris B, Elaine Bruno. I'm sure we have some more guys, but let's get up on out of here. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. And if you hit the thumbs up button, maybe Derek will learn how to do hand signals when he talks, just like me. So then you can have all the gesticulating in the middle of the show as Devon sits in the center as the Zen master of PHLY Sixers. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll be back at 2:30 on Friday.
Thank you, Bree.
Thank you, Bree.
We all silly like the mayor.